Welcome to The Long Way Around. I'm your host, Malcolm Byrne, and you're listening to Radio Kingston. Always a pleasure to hear First Voices Radio before the show. Keeps me inspired and motivated. And so, by the way, that little piece of music that you always hear every week, it's actually a composition that I recorded and wrote myself. It's called, from my most recent record, which you can get on Spotify. The song is called Kingdom Come, and I think that, well, maybe one day I'll play the version with the words, because I think the words are actually kind of relevant to the human condition, if you will. Tonight, my guest is Alex Christoforou. He's it's okay, you can go ahead and do that. It's a great pleasure to have him on the show. Alex is one of the co-hosts of the Duran. His other co-host is Alexander Mercouris, and I've had them both on the show a couple of times, actually. But I had invited Alex to be on the show, but a little bit more about the Duran. The Duran is a news media platform that advances a realpolitik position, and it's the number one geopolitics podcast on the world, with some 365,000 subscribers and counting. It's a wonder how they haven't been canceled on YouTube yet, I wonder. But anyway, they're still there, and they're doing it great, and more power to them. Alex also hosts a popular daily show, which has 180,000 subscribers, and that's just on YouTube. Alex's show and the Duran air daily on several other internet channels, including Telegram, Rumble, Odyssey, BitChute, and Rockfin, and also locals. Audio-only shows are on Spotify and iTunes, Apple's iTunes, and SoundCloud. Alex Christoforou is based in Athens, Greece, and also reports from Cyprus. I wanted to ask Alex back on the show because lately he'd been in Russia, actually, behind the Iron Curtain. In particular, he was has been in Moscow and St. Petersburg, where he spent a considerable amount of time. And without further, so the first half of the show will be the interview with Alex, and then the second half I'm going to do some theme-oriented music in Alex's honor. So without further ado, here's Alex Christoforou. How are you doing?
Doing good. How are you?
Good to see you.
Good to see you. How things going?
It's been a little while.
Yeah.
So are you still in Russia?
Yeah, I arrived in Moscow yesterday evening.
Okay.
Yeah.
How long have you been there? A couple of weeks.
I'm approaching I'm approaching my fourth week.
Oh wow. Okay.
I've been here 3 weeks. Yeah.
Where else have you been?
I've just been Moscow and St. Petersburg.
Okay.
Yeah.
And well, I wanted to thank you for joining me. I'm going to we can just talk for 45 minutes or however long you're comfortable, and I'll put music on the back end and do that later and so forth. So, Alex Christoforou, welcome to the Long Way Round. Thanks for joining me all the way from Moscow, Russia. So you've been in the country for 3 or 4 weeks, and I wanted to ask you, first of all, what's your overall impressions so far of being in the country?
It's great. I mean, I'm enjoying my time here. It's a very positive feeling here in Russia.
Yeah. And are you getting a sense of how people are feeling about the conflict and with the Ukraine and so forth, or?
Yeah. It's one of the main topics when you talk to people, if not the main topic, when you talk to people. But the country is the people that I've come in contact with. They're living their life. I mean, the war is on their mind, but the conflict is on their mind because in Russia, they still haven't declared any type of war. This is still a special military operation, and it's very contained and very limited. So the people here, they're living their life. They're going to work. They're doing what normal people around the world are doing, but they have this conflict in Ukraine, in the east of Ukraine, and they have every now and then there are pinprick drone strikes that try to get through to Moscow, or that try to sometimes get through to Moscow, as well as in Crimea and the Black Sea. But for the most part, people here understand what's going on. They understand what this is about, and they're living a normal life, or trying to live their normal life.
Mm-hmm. And would you say the level of support is kind of across the board, or would it be, I was talking to a fellow Canadian, Dimitri Lascaris, who had been on a fact-finding mission of his own, self-financed, over to Russia, and actually he went to the Donbass and so forth. And he gave me the impression that the support, especially amongst people who remember, the fall of the Soviet Union and then the dark days of the 90s, under Yeltsin and the corruption and so forth, they kind of have how did he say it? Maybe a more historically, they view this in a certain way that, say, for example, someone in their 20s, a younger person might not have that historical sense of how this is. It's been described as an existential situation for Russia, as opposed to just, a sideshow.
Yeah, there are some people that view this as an existential threat. There are other people that see this as a NATO proxy war, and there are other people that I've talked to that say that this is the U.S. once again trying to destroy Russia. This is another foreign power that's trying to destroy Russia. It was the French, it was the Germans, now it's the Americans. I think the Russians, sounds weird to say, but I think they just take it in, I don't want to say in stride, but it's just kind of like every 70 years, they have this sense of every 70 years, a country tries to invade us or dismantle us or destroy us. And I think people here are very confident now that they can repel whatever forces are trying to cause trouble in the country. And I think they understand, at least the Kremlin's description of this conflict and the narrative that they framed around this conflict. People seem to understand that, and they're rallying around that. So they do have a historical view of things, but they also understand the present day goals of what NATO wants to do to Russia. They're under no illusions that NATO is their friends or Europe is their friends. They understand that they want to break Russia apart. They want to balkanize it. And the people here will fight that. They absolutely will fight that. But it still is very normal here. I want to say that it's not Russia is not on war footing. Their production is definitely ramping up, and Russia is getting stronger and stronger, while the West and Ukraine is getting weaker and weaker. But they're still not on war footing, and I think that's very, very important for everyone to understand this. If Russia were on war footing, my sense, speaking to people here, is that this conflict would be over in a couple of days.
Mm-hmm.
But Russia doesn't want that of Ukraine either. I mean, the interesting part is that they're very, very sympathetic to Ukrainians and the Russian, especially the Russian-speaking Ukrainians. They understand that this is that in their eyes, the West has put brother against brother, cousin against cousin, to fight each other. But the Russians, they're blaming the West for all of this. Mm-hmm. This is how they see it.
So I suppose it would be reasonable to say that the level of support for the President Putin and the government is fairly high.
Off the charts. Even people that would not be supportive of Putin say, going to St. Petersburg is probably the most liberal of cities, the most European oriented of cities. And the support for Putin is pretty much across the board very high support. I mean, I met a couple of people who were not happy with Putin's policy in Ukraine. They do exist. There are a couple of people who have voiced their grievances, but most everybody that I had contact with was very supportive of Putin, even those who may not support the Putin government's policy on domestic issues, on social issues. They were very supportive of the policy in this conflict.
Mm-hmm.
And people need to remember that Russia is like every other country. It has social issues, it has domestic issues, like every other country in the world. And people are also very concerned about these things.
What would be the nature? You mentioned there was a few people you'd spoken to that are not supportive. What were their grievances? What would they say in the?
A couple of people that I had contact with, they just said that they viewed this as an illegal invasion. They felt like Russia was moving away from Europe, and they were very Europe oriented. Mm-hmm. They wanted to travel to Europe. They wanted to perhaps live or work in Europe or go to the United States and live and work for an extended period. So for them, they felt, my sense was they felt that their opportunity to live in the United States or to live in the UK had been cut off because of the Kremlin's decision.
So their issues are sort of more personal based as opposed to a generalized kind of.
Yeah, it was more personal. They felt like their opportunity to travel to the UK had been lost, for example. I'm thinking of one person in particular right now that comes to mind. He felt like, he was going to move to the UK, and this had now been ended. This dream.
Much. Yeah. I kind of felt the same way when, I have I'm a Canadian, but also have a British citizenship. And when Brexit was passed, I was a little annoyed because I was like, I used to have an EU passport, and I could, I was like, oh, back to the old drawing board with that. But it was more of a personal issue. It wasn't a criticism of Brexit as an overall policy.
These are few people. I want to say these are. I'm thinking maybe 2 or 3 people that have told me this. The rest, and I've had contact with a lot of people. Everybody else was just, we need to do this.
Yeah. So you're, look, part of my effort over the last year and a half has been to sort of try and debunk the myths and the sort of not just Russia, but, in this particular circumstance, anti-Russian narrative that has been built up over the past 10 years or so in the United States, especially, and certainly in Europe. But, we started off with Trump and Russiagate, and then it's, turned into this, we need another bad guy, Putin, the arch villain, he stole the election and all this kind of, so you reach a point where, films and television, the bad guys are always either Iranian or Russian, and it's become sort of a caricature. And I often hear from people when I talk about this situation that they'll say, well, yes, but would you rather live would you rather live in Russia where, you're going to be sent off to a gulag just for saying, something like, I don't like Putin's, face, or something derogatory towards the government. I mean, there's all this kind of, and then you hear people supportive of this guy Navalny, and they don't know anything about Navalny. They sort of hold him up as some sort of beacon of freedom and democracy, which is a little ironic when you do research on the guy's background, and you find out that he's not exactly the image of Joan of Arc that Anthony Blinken would portray. So you know where I'm going with this, and I'm curious to get your response.
Well, look, I think you're right on Navalny. Navalny is a nobody here in Russia. He's a non-issue here in Russia.
That's what
as a politician. I mean, he doesn't even register as a politician. Some people don't even know him or aren't really that familiar with him. So Navalny is much more popular outside of Russia
Right.
than he is inside of Russia.
I'm saying.
Yeah, and to be quite honest, when I hear people who claim to be progressive or liberals, they claim to be progressive or liberals. Navalny is on the other side of the spectrum. I mean, the guy is more nationalist than Putin. I mean, he is far to the right. So I don't understand this progressive liberal love affair with Navalny, because if he was in the United States, these people would be screaming, right wing, you know the words.
Yeah, he'd be
Um,
sort of in the Ron DeSantis bag or something like that.
Further
Whatever.
right, go
Even
further
further.
right,
Like,
go
dare I
further
say it, but
right.
he
Yeah.
comes across as a Nazi.
Yeah, go further right. I mean, that's his support. And then he has the young, like he has a lot of, I don't want to say a lot. He has a support base of a very young, maybe nationalist type of uber nationalist type of Russian citizens, but it doesn't register. It doesn't even register on polling data. That's my point. He's much more popular outside of Russia, and it's the West. They've picked up on Navalny. They see him as someone who can replace Putin and be a temporary stopgap, and they don't really care whether he's left or right or center. They just see it as let's just get this guy in, and we'll deal with his politics later,
Mhm.
which is the standard policy when the West is implementing a regime change. They don't really think about the people or the governments that they're going to put in place when they do the regime change. They'll deal with that later. Let's just get the person out now, and we'll deal with the chaos at a future date. But no, the whole Navalny thing's a non-issue. I don't know his specifics to the court case, but
Well,
he's been in trouble.
apparently, the origin of the corruption charges, those charges were filed in Britain.
Yeah,
Not even in Russia.
yeah, exactly. He's been in trouble with the law for a while now. I mean, he's had multiple court cases, and then he had the poisoning, and he went to Germany, and then he came back for some reason. The whole thing is very, very strange. But as far as the Russia's a gulag and you can't speak about Putin, dare I say 70 to 80% of the media here, the independent media, is critical of the government. Nothing happens to them.
Well, so you just said they have independent media?
Yeah, of course. There's a lot
I
of,
mean,
yeah,
I'm being
absolutely.
facetious
Yeah,
when I say
I
that,
know. Yeah, they
but
do. And a
that's
lot of
not
people,
the impression you get when you
no.
watch CNN or
Uh,
something like that. They're like, oh, it's all, state-run,
Look,
controlled.
yeah,
These
no, it's not state run, it's not controlled. It's watch my videos and you'll see a very very open, friendly, orderly, clean, I don't even know, law-abiding society. I mean, it's very normal here. I don't know what to say. It's very normal. It's people from all over the Ruski Mir, the Russian world. You have a lot of different ethnicities and cultures, and they're all living together. They all see themselves as Russian, and things are pretty calm here. I mean, it's hard to explain until you come. It's until you visit. It's a very, dare I say, it's a very nice place to visit, and it's a very nice place to live. The state, the government, they really give people a very good life here.
Mhm.
I mean, dare I say that you're not going to find a lot of the stuff here in Russia that you in the West. You're not going to find it, at least in Moscow and St. Petersburg. Uh,
Well,
I can even give you some specific examples.
yeah, please do.
For example, when I came to St. Petersburg, I did my first video the evening that I arrived, and I went to grab some food. And it's a personal story, but oddly enough, my back tooth cracked, like
Mm.
half of it is cracked, and it happens. And so I was like, what do I do now? And so the next morning, it was evening, so I slept on it, and the next morning I woke up and I went to to a dentist down the street, close to where I was staying. I walked in, explained to them my problem. The receptionist was very friendly. She said, "Give me your phone number and we'll see what we can do." 30 minutes later, she called me and she said, "We have an opening at 12:30. Came in, hour and a half. They fixed it. This is the same day, by the way. They fixed it. Amazing, amazing service. The dentist was so friendly. She was, constantly asking me if I'm comfortable, how are things going, the newest technology in the office. And when I went to pay, I said, "How much?" She said, 7,000 rubles. In other words, $70.
God, I need my teeth fixed. I think I'll go to Russia.
Yeah, that was it. Same day. I didn't have to wait 2 months. But what I want to say is that, these are the services that the Russian government provides for their citizens. And the parks are very nice. The streets are very, very clean and orderly. And there's a lot of cafes and shops and bars. And, people are walking around and they're having coffees with friends, and they seem very happy. I don't know how to explain it. It seems like it's a very very nice life in Moscow or St. Petersburg. It's you have to come and see it. It's not this gloom and doom, depressing gulag type of narrative. It's completely on the other side of that.
Well, I have to say, watching some of your posts and so forth from there, one can't help but observe passing goings on in the background. You're often in public spaces, parks, and walking around, and I'm observing while I'm listening to you. I'm seeing people walking by, and I'm like, this could be Stockholm, Sweden, or Copenhagen, Denmark, for all it's worth. Like, they just, the architecture is a little different, but other than that, there's people coming and going and walking their dogs and jogging and listening to, on their phones. And I'm like, wait a second. I mean, and I'm open-minded. I'm like, but if I'm getting off topic here, stop me. But I feel as if the way that the West, especially in America, has created this image of not only Russia, but like places like China. I mean, these are big countries. They're not monolithic places, obviously, but it's almost like they're portraying it to get people to not look at what's actually going on. For example, here in the United States, where people come here and they're like, God, the roads are bumpy, like I can't get a doctor. I can't get in to see a dentist. And if I do, it's going to cost me $8,000 just to get a molar fixed. I mean, the quality of life in the West is declining at an alarming rate. And I think, if people in this country, America specifically, knew what you're telling me on a broader level, they would be more ready to sort of do something about what's going on here, as opposed to fixating on some foreign situation. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Maybe if they stopped spending 300 billion in Ukraine, maybe
That's
they
what
could
I'm
fix some
saying.
stuff. Yeah. Or
That's
1 trillion military budget. I mean, look, the government here, at least in these two big cities that I've been to, they give people very good services. The transportation is amazing. It's amazing. The metro, the buses, the taxis.
But it's not just
I've never.
It's not just the I mean, you can have a bus that's beautiful, but you also have to have a beautiful bus driver. Like, the attitude that people have
The
towards
attitude.
work.
Yes, the roads. The roads are in excellent condition. The punctuality, the trains. Every 1 to 2 minutes is a new train. I mean, you're never waiting 5 or 10 minutes at the metro for a train. It's on time. It's amazing how efficient it is, and how clean the metro is, and how cheap it is. How cheap it is. And You don't need to buy tickets. You can buy tickets at a discount, but you can just go with your Mir card, which is their Visa MasterCard replacement. Just put that right over the till and you're in. It's everything is very, very efficient and well managed. And the people at the metro, they're very nice to you when they want to check your bag. They're very friendly. They just do a quick check of your bag just to make sure it's okay. They tell you thank you very much. In these cities, the government, it's obvious that the mayor and the people that are running these cities are doing an amazing job, and they're providing very good services to their citizens. Now you're going to get the argument, and you're always going to get the pushback. People saying, "Oh, well, that's Moscow and that's St. Petersburg. Go to this village or that village." Well, Russia, as every country, has problems in smaller villages. Absolutely. Some villages or some smaller cities are nice. Some of them probably have deeper problems, but you can find that in every country. In the United States, this exists. In Europe, it exists. In Greece, go to some villages in Greece. Some of them have real serious problems. I don't want to make it seem like Russia's this perfect country on domestic issues. It still needs some work, but the government is working on it.
But it's not a giant, the world's largest gulag either.
Yeah, no,
Which
it's
is the
not.
impression that you get from, if you watch CNN or MSNBC, you just get this nonstop barrage of just anti-Russian nonsense, which, not even having been there, I know it's all nonsense. So
it's nonsense. And, I think in today's world, I think you would be very hard pressed to find a nicer city than Moscow or St. Petersburg. I think it would be very difficult in the West right now, in Europe or in the US, to find a city that's comparable to Moscow or St. Petersburg. At that scale, we're talking St. Petersburg is a city of, say, 6 or 7 million, and Moscow is a city of, say, 15 million, give or take. I don't think there's a city in the West right now that can compare. I really don't. People are going to be shocked when I say this, but I'm here. I'm observing things, and
well, let's take it down to basics. For example, even in the small city that I live in, Kingston, New York, which is about an hour and something north of Manhattan, the level of homelessness has risen exponentially over the past 5 to 6 years, especially since, since 2008, 2009. But things, do you see that kind of level? Because every city in this country has got like homeless camps in them, and it's just becoming a real crisis.
No, you don't see any homeless camps. Every now and then you walk by and you do see one homeless person. Every now and then I've seen it, but it's been very rare. And look, my videos are, they're one take. I'm walking around the streets, and I don't think anyone that has watched my videos has seen a homeless person or has seen a lot of graffiti or rubbish on the street. Very, very rare to see it. Very rare. I mean, there's a very low unemployment rate in Russia. It's extremely low, and the economy is booming now. I mean, boy, did the sanctions fail. This was the biggest misstep that the U.S. and the EU have come up with. I mean, the country is firing on all cylinders now, the economy. I mean, people here, you can see that people here are they're on the ascendant. They're prospering. You can sense it.
Well, I'm going to, in the second hour, I'm going to feature, I've been discovering a lot of very interesting and cool, not only Russian, but Belarusian and Ukrainian artists, rappers, and musicians. Pharoah is one of the most popular that I'll be playing, because I think it's important. I mean, I have to think that the beef with Russia has nothing to do with the people of either country. Like, I don't meet a lot of Americans that really reflect the attitudes of our government towards Russia. I think that this is a construct that the elites and the power structures, not only, well, the NATO people, at some point, I want you to do your Justin Trudeau just for me, okay? Because apparently he's not no longer living with his wife Sophie. They broke up, so a lot of Canadians are in mourning over that little issue. But but like there's this attitude that the elites are putting across, whereas I don't think the average American and the average Russian have anything to fight about. Like, I really don't.
Zero.
I
Zero
think
to fight
I
about. We're
think
more similar than we are opposites. I mean, and I'm speaking English here. I'm walking around, and for the most part, even if I'm speaking with other people, if I'm doing videos, my videos are in English, and I'm speaking pretty loud.
you're not getting censored or shut down
Oh,
or
people actually are coming up to me. I mean, they're smiling. Some people are photo bombing me. Normal stuff that you'd see in any country. I mean,
yeah,
it's nothing. Yeah, it's normal stuff that kids do, that teenagers are doing as they're photo bombing me, or they're making little signs behind me. I mean,
not getting
normal
sprayed,
things.
not getting sprayed with water like you were
Yeah,
in where was
in
that where you were
Armenia,
in
in Armenia, yeah.
Armenia? Yeah. Oh,
Normal things, this hangover, this Cold War hangover that these neocons have in the West is exhausting. It really is exhausting. And I think people here are tired of it. I think people here are generally tired of the demonization. They're tired of being looked on as lower, as the stereotype of being drunk or being aggressive or being gloomy. I think people are tired of that here, and I think they see it as an insult, and they're tired of constantly having to fight for their existence, and I think they've had enough, and they're pushing back now because they're very confident. And people in the West need to understand, that Russia has not unleashed its full potential. It's at 10%. It's fighting a very contained, very measured, very slow,
but
deliberate conflict.
but then you get for example, President Biden going on national television saying Russia has lost this war, it's over. Where is the disconnect? When is this charade going to end? I mean, when is the curtain going to come up and we're going to see, that the guy behind the curtain is just a guy. He's not a magical Wizard of Oz or something.
Like it did in Afghanistan. 2 days before Afghanistan crumbled, Biden was saying that everything's under control. It's the same thing. Everything is under control, and people in the West are either believing it or they just don't care. They're sleeping on it until it starts crumbling, and it's going to crumble. It's going to crumble, and Russia knows that. I think China knows that. The BRICS understand this. That what they're doing in Ukraine is not sustainable. And the U.S. citizen is on the hook for Ukraine. I mean, the U.S. citizen is keeping Ukraine afloat, full.
Hmm.
They're paying for everything.
Yes, of course.
Everything.
Without our support, primarily U.S. support, the country would collapse within days.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Within a week or 2 weeks, the country would completely collapse.
I mean, I sort of see this as a warning sign to other countries. I mean, this is why, BRICS is getting more and more popular and more countries are joining BRICS, is because they're seeing, look, if you get in bed with America, this is where you're going to end up. I mean, the track record, when you look at, Ukraine, Afghanistan, Syria, Iran, Iraq, Libya, all these countries, they're just devastated by America's presence, and It's just not a good deal. It's like doing a show
Needless
with the
intervention.
Corleones or
Yeah,
sorry.
needless intervention. The U.S. has nothing of interest in Ukraine. I mean, the U.S., maybe elites have something of interest in Ukraine. That's a different story. The
Right.
American
Well,
people
yeah.
have nothing of interest in Ukraine, zero. And the solution for Ukraine was laid out 10 years ago in the Minsk agreements,
Mhm.
one and two times. And then for 8 years, Russia was pleading with Europe and the United States. We need to solve this. You need to implement the Minsk agreements. We need to solve this. We need a new security architecture in Europe. You need to stop expanding NATO.
Mhm.
But it
But
fell
see,
on
when
deaf
I
ears.
try to have conversations about that, uh, I often get this kind of pushback from people that are not in agreement with you or I on this subject. That when you say like Russia was kind of had its back to the wall, and what would be I was talking to Garland Nixon. I did an event yesterday with Garland and Scott Ritter in New York. It was called Humanity for Peace. It was a anti-war, pro-peace rally, and Scott and Garland were both speakers, as I was. And after the event, we were sitting in a local Irish pub having a chat, and Garland kept reiterating this point that he's made over and over again by saying, look, what if the paradigm was different? Imagine that, China or Russia had 300,000 soldiers on the Mexican border and missiles. You get,
So sorry, it was the housekeeping
oh, I was
that
going to
told me
say,
30 minutes.
you
Sorry.
forgot to put your sign up.
Yeah,
Please do
yeah,
not disturb.
yeah.
No, I don't need
Yeah,
my.
please continue. Please continue.
No,
I'm
I was
sorry.
just saying, what Garland had said was, imagine if you just reversed the situation and put 300,000, Chinese troops on the Mexican border, armed to the teeth with missiles pointing, towards, like, would America sit back and just say, well, geez, we need to talk about this? Or no, exactly what the response would be, right? Like it would be no doubt in my mind what the response would be. So to sort of point the finger at Russia and say, well, why are you behaving like a bully, and you've become this re-imperialist conquesting, like that's the image of Russia that I can't get my head around. This idea that Russia's on, it's not, if we don't stop them in Ukraine, they're going to take over the rest of the world.
Right.
I mean, that just doesn't make sense.
Right. Right. On the one hand, Russia's losing the conflict, according to Biden, according
Right.
to Blinken, all these people, and they're running out of weapons, and their military is incompetent, and they continue to retreat, and there are a bunch of oafs, and they have no idea what they're doing. But on the other side, if this continues, Russia's going to take over all of Europe. Well, which one is it?
Yeah.
Which one is it? I mean, it's laughable. It's ridiculous. This conflict, Russia proposed many, many solutions, and many solutions and agreements were signed in order to prevent the conflict. Signed not only by Ukraine and the Donbass, but they were France and Germany were supposed to implement these agreements. And we've had multiple interviews now with Angela Merkel and Francois Hollande, as well as Petro Poroshenko, who was the one-time president when these agreements were signed, and they all said the same thing. These agreements were never going to be enforced because the goal of these agreements was to buy time so that we can arm Ukraine with NATO weapons and NATO training. That is the bottom line. Build fortifications in the east and prepare Ukraine for a smash with Russia. They're on record saying it.
Mhm.
Angela Merkel is on record in 3 instances saying that the Minsk agreements, their only goal was to buy time for Ukraine. That's it. They weren't. If they had enforced the Minsk agreements, Malcolm, we would have had a federated Ukraine, like the United States. Different states, with states having rights. For example, Lugansk and Donetsk, the east of Ukraine, would have been more autonomous, but they would have been part of Ukraine. Ukraine would have had all of this territory with the exception of Crimea. Crimea remained Russian, but everything else would have been intact. And it was the solution. People would be able to speak Russian. Is that so bad to speak Russian? People would have been able to keep their culture, speak the language that they wanted, and still be part of a federal republic of Ukraine. But they didn't want that. And then when Russia had one demand they had in the weeks up to the conflict, in the year up to the conflict, do not let Ukraine get into NATO. Ukraine cannot get into NATO. That's all they were saying. And then we can talk about all the rest. But Ukraine cannot get into NATO. What did the West do? Ukraine's going to get into NATO. It's their right. And then you hear the argument, well, Ukraine's a sovereign nation. It has the right to join NATO. Sure, I agree with that. Every country has the right to join any security alliance they wish. But decisions have consequences.
Mm-hmm.
And if Mexico wants to join a military pact with Russia, they have the sovereign right to do so. But, the U.S. has to protect its interests as well. The same goes for Cyprus or Greece or any country. You can, you have the right to do many things. But when you make decisions in life, you have to weigh the consequences and how it affects others. If I'm living at my home, I have the right to build a huge wall. I have the right to have parties every night. I have the right to play my drum set. But if it bothers my neighbor, I have to think about these things.
Right.
You know what I mean? This
civil society, basically.
Yeah, this whole argument that, well, Ukraine can join any military alliance, it can place nukes on its territory, missiles on its territory. This is not realistic. This is nonsense. Ukraine's role, its leadership, should have understood that its role was of a bridge, to be the bridge between Europe and Russia. That should have been its role. And it should have embraced that role.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, it got manipulated by the neocons, specifically the neocons and the neoliberals, but it got manipulated by these guys, and they promised Ukraine all of these riches and wealth and power and the balkanization of Russia and the destruction of Russia, and they fell for it, and they got boxed in. And the big lie was that Russia was weak, and it's this backwards country, and it'll never be able to take on a NATO proxy like Ukraine. And we've built these massive fortifications over 9 years, and we've armed it to the teeth. And this is going to finally be the end of Russia. Do these people not know their history? How many people have tried with Russia? How many people, how many empires have tried and failed?
I mean, I'm an avid, history buff, and I've studied, not only the First and Second World War, but the Napoleonic Wars. And of course, the outcome is often, it's always the same.
Always the same.
Goes back to Catherine the Great, I mean, it's, well, this has been great. I'm so glad that I've been able to connect with you while you're there. I just have a couple of other ideas or questions I'd like to talk with you before I let you go. And the first is, in the foreseeable future, how do you see things going with the SMO? There's talk now that it's sort of it's only a matter of time. This collapse of the Ukraine military is kind of inevitable, and it's sort of happening like almost like a domino effect. Do you think that's the reality, or do you think we're in for a stalemate situation?
Well, they're using the word stalemate, the media in the West, but that's misleading. It's a stalemate on the front lines, because the Ukraine military in 3 months in this big counteroffensive has yet to reach the first line of Russian defenses. First line of Russian defenses. Russia has defenses which go 3 to 4 lines deep, and they still haven't reached the first line. They're still fighting in basically what was the front line 3, 4, 5 months ago. So this is a stalemate, but it's a stalemate where Ukraine is losing tens of thousands of men and equipment in order to gain nothing. In order to gain no.
Scott Ritter told me, and Scott's very good with, he used to be an intelligence analyst, and he said that in his opinion, or in his calculations based on numbers, kill ratios, and all the rest of it, that Ukraine has lost upwards of almost 40,000 killed in the last 3 months.
Well, that's in line with what the Ministry of Defense came out with the other day. They said 43,000 killed on the front lines. Killed. Not, not killed and wounded, killed. 43,000. That was their number. So Scott is right on target. And that's been in the last, that's just been in June and July.
But the other thing that Scott was quick to point out, and this is something that I think is important to mention, is that with his estimation of the kill ratio being 10-1, for every one Russian soldier that's killed, I hate talking about it in these terms, but it has to be done. So for every one Russian killed in action, there's roughly 10 Ukrainians killed. So that means, based on those numbers, that Ukraine has lost more people in 1 month, or sorry, roughly 3 months, than America lost in the entire Afghan war over 20 years. That's 4,500. That's a lot of people, right? By anyone's accounting. So it's not as if, Russia's like sort of sitting back and, you know what I mean? It's terrible for both sides.
Because for Russians, Ukrainians are, once again, there's a part of Ukraine that for them is very, it's brotherly to them. The west of Ukraine is a whole different story.
Yeah.
But, Ukraine is destroying itself. It's destroying itself for what? For the Bidens? For
the Bidens, for
Lincolns?
Raytheon, for
Raytheon?
Douglas.
For what?
Yeah, I have a friend from Odessa, and he moved to New York just to get away from the war, and he's a young guy, and he said to me, like, I said, if there could be an outcome that could happen in the next month, he said, I asked him, what would you prefer? Would you rather see Ukraine win or Russia win? He said, I would like Russia to win tomorrow. So this is just over, and we can all just get back to normal, like get back to being normal people living in our country. Like, that's the attitude that it's one person, but I can't imagine that a lot of Ukrainians want to see this thing go on forever. Like, why would you,
No, they don't. But it's hard to get a feel for what's going on in Ukraine, because the Zelensky regime, they've got the country on lockdown. They've got the media. They've got the political parties. They've dismantled any political opposition. They've dismantled any media. They've postponed the elections indefinitely. They're in a state of martial law. So it's hard to get a feel for anything that's happening in Ukraine. This is the furthest thing from a democracy right now in Ukraine. It's
just completely ironic, of course, when you think
Yeah.
about it. It's like we're supposed to be defending freedom and democracy, yet the country that we're supporting has nothing close to that.
Nothing close. There's billions and billions of U.S. weapons and money, Western weapons and money that goes into Ukraine. It's unaudited. It's unaccounted for. God knows what's happening to these weapons. They're hitting the black market. They're being sold all over the world.
Weapons are turning up in Mali and Africa.
Yeah,
like that.
Yeah, this is a complete disaster. But we say it on our show all the time. Unfortunately, for the group of people in D.C., there is no reverse gear. They're politically invested in this.
Yeah,
and Zelensky's politically boxed in. He has nowhere to turn now. He's the Ukraine government, they have no choice either. They have to continue to push forward. And what are they pushing forward towards? They're pushing forward towards a Russian wall. And Russia is getting stronger and stronger with each passing day. Ukraine and the West, and this is important, it's not only Ukraine, the West is getting weaker and weaker with each passing day.
Yeah.
The U.S. and Europe combined, they cannot meet Russia's production capabilities. They can't, not in ammunition, not in weapons. Russia is building drone factories. They're building tanks at astonishing levels. And the U.S. cannot compete, and Europe can't compete. They're not even close to competing. And They won't be closed for the next decade. And that's
not
if
gonna
the
help.
US
That's
and
not going to
Europe,
help Ukraine, is it?
they can't keep up. And that blows apart the myth of Russia being,
You see that? You see that headline?
Ukraine's plan. If Russia,
That was in
Politico. I
Politico
read
just
that.
yesterday.
Yeah, I read that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is their off ramp to assassinate Zelensky and say Russia did it.
The best outcome they could do is surrender and accept Russia's terms, which are going to be heavy. It's going to be a big price to pay. But that's the best outcome for all the people involved. And that's the only outcome to save what's left of Ukraine and to save what's left of Europe.
Right.
I mean, Europe is collapsing as well. The European economies are collapsing.
Well, let's take it a step further because, as I said yesterday, I was the speaker at this Humanity for Peace event where Scott and Garland and a number of Jose Vega was there as well. The overriding concern is that of the almost inevitability if the United States dictates the terms that the only thing they will accept is a defeat of Russia, then the inevitable outcome of that will be nuclear war. And it seems as if our government is just. I mean, the idea that people are talking about limited nuclear war just seems so absurd. It's like sort of Dr. Strangelove territory.
And what nuclear war are they going to have with Russia? What limited war? The minute you get on this road, it's all over for everybody. Russia has the most nuclear weapons in the world, and they have hypersonic capable nuclear weapons. They have weaponry that the U.S. does not possess, and they have weaponry that the U.S. cannot defend against. I mean, people in the U.S. and the U.K. and Europe need to understand this.
I don't think they do, Scott.
Well, they should. They should because if it came to nuclear escalation, okay, no one's going to win, but Russia has the capability to hit the U.S. anywhere, anytime, any place, and there's really not much that the U.S. could do about it. I mean, the U.S. doesn't have hypersonic missile technology, from what I understand, and they're not close to acquiring it.
Well, they also certainly don't have the technology to detect those missiles in a manner that would make it effective. At least according to a few people I've spoken to.
God forbid we get there. God forbid we get there. I don't think we're going to get there. I mean, at least when it comes to the nuclear question, I'm optimistic that logic will prevail, and it will end up being at some sort of Afghanistan collapse type of level, much worse for the West. But it's going to be bad for Europe. I think the Biden White House, oddly enough, if they were smart about it, they would find an off-ramp. The collapse is going to happen anyway. And, they control the media, so they'll be able to cover over this. I mean, I really believe that if the Biden White House really wanted to cover over a Ukraine collapse and a European collapse, they'll be able to do it. Europe is in a terrible mess. Ukraine is not a state anymore.
Yeah.
If there's one party that can come out of this relatively okay, I mean relatively okay and undamaged, it's the Biden White House, because they have such a control over media, big tech, media narratives, that they'll be able to get through what would be a catastrophic collapse.
Right. Okay, well, I'm going to end the conversation with a little bit of humor. Okay, I'm Joe Biden, and I'm on the phone to you, Mr. Trudeau, to discuss about ongoing support for our joint venture. Who am I talking? Oh, Justin, how are you? This is Joe. How are you doing, Justin? How's things at home?
Hey, Joe. How are you doing? It's good to hear from you. Been a long time.
Are you still wearing those pink pants that I saw you wearing a couple of years ago, or you stopped doing that?
Only on special occasions.
Well, I I know you're having some domestic problems, but listen, Justin, you gotta stay with the program, okay? We need you. You know, you're a good-looking guy, and I know I'm pretty ugly and old and kind of losing my marbles, but you've got a great image, so we really need you to stay on board with supporting this facade of military conflict that we're pretending we're having. So are you on board with us, Justin? You gonna be stay with the team?
Don't don't worry, Joe. I will be supporting Ukraine for as much as it lasts. Or is it as long as it lasts? Or is it as much as it takes? What's the script again, Joe? I don't have it in front of me.
Well, you're asking the wrong guy, Jesse. I mean, I'm just the president of the United States. How am I supposed to know anything? Come on, I'm busy falling off my bicycle. What do you want from me? Anyway, I got this kid called Hunter I got to deal with. Holy crap! I hope
Oh
you don't have
yeah.
any kids like
We-
that.
yeah. Give Hunter my best. We had some good times partying together.
Oh, come on, man. All right, Alex. Well, maybe we can form a comedy duo and take it
Yeah.
on the road when you get back. Okay. But in the meantime, you got to laugh. I mean, what's that scene from Monty Python at the end of the thing where they're all hanging on the cross?
Yeah.
And the guy's
If you
complaining. He says, "Oh, don't worry, just whistle. It'll be all
yeah.
right. Could be
If
worse."
if you don't laugh, you cry. So at least, it's important to laugh and get through these tough times.
Got to. Well, I wish you well on the rest. How much longer are you planning to stay there?
I'm not sure, probably like another week or so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, safe travels and be well. Thank you so much for your
Thank you very
time.
much. Thank you.
Put your sign on the door. Do not disturb.
Yeah.
'Cause otherwise, that happened to me once in LA.
They-
I was working on a record out there with somebody, and I forgot to put my sign on the door, and they kept knocking on the door, and I didn't
yeah.
answer it. And eventually, the woman went away, and she comes back with it. And eventually, it was a whole crowd of people, and they thought I was dead. They were speaking in Spanish, like "El hombre es muerto." And finally, I opened up the door. I was like stark naked. They all started doing signs of the cross. Oh, God.
Yeah, I always forget to put that sign on there. But I left most of the day. I put the please clean the room. And when I came back, it wasn't cleaned yet. So,
Oh.
they should have,
Oh, well. I
what can you do?
instruct the Russians
Yeah.
on customer service of a great place. All right, man.
All right.
Good talking to
All
you.
right, Malcolm. Thank you very much.
Take care.
Take care.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
That was my interview with Alex Christoforou, one half of the Duran from Moscow. And as you could tell from listening to that, Alex has a very good sense of humor. We're going to just take a quick break for some station IDs and promos, and we'll be right back with hour 2 of The Long Way Round, featuring some music by artists such as Shaman, Pharoah, and Nemiga, who I've been listening to quite a lot and playing on this show, so please stay tuned for hour 2 right after this. Welcome back, Kata, Mr. Kata, to hour 2 of The Long Way Round. I'm your host, Malcolm Byrne. For the second hour, as I said, we're going to listen to some music from some popular and some not so popular artists mostly from Russia. Nemiga is actually from Belarus, as some may say. But I'm going to start off with a track by one of Russia's most popular artists, a young fellow by the name of Shaman. His track, I Am Russian, is very popular at the moment. So, and then I'll follow that with some Pharoah and a few other things. So, with love, from Russia with love, as they say.
Я вдыхаю этот воздух, солнце в небе Надо мной летает вольный ветер, он такой же, как и я. И хочется просто любить и дышать, и мне другого не нужно. Такой, какой есть, и меня не сломать. И все потому, что я русский. Я иду до конца. Я русский. Моя кровь от отца. Я русский. И мне повезло. Я русский. Всему миру назло. В небо улетает эта песня и зовет меня с собой. Обо мне пылает мое сердце, освещая путь домой, где хочется просто любить и дышать, и мне другого не нужно. Такой ж я есть, и меня не сломать. И все потому, что я русский. Я иду до конца. Я русский. Моя кровь от отца. Я русский. И мне повезло. Я русский. Всему миру назло. Я русский, я иду до конца. Я русский, моя кровь от отца. Я русский, и мне повезло. Я русский, всему миру назло. Я русский.
Во мне кудин пыль, я уже лечу. Плохие суки вокруг, но я одна. Я думал, я умру, там я один умру. Да пришла ты, я нашел силы встать. Я уже тебя где-то встречал, походу в прошлых жизнях не раз. Я уже тебя где-то встречал, походу в прошлых жизнях, прошлых жизнях. Раму уходит с моей головы, походу меня лечишь ты. Big body bouncing, запах травы, над нами не звезды, но за болью в глаза. Но я знаю, куда идти, меня не интересует AP, я нашел что-то важнее. Я уже лечу, плохие суки вокруг, но я одна. Я думал, я умру, но я один умру. Да пришла ты, я нашел силы встать. Я уже тебя где-то встречал, походу в прошлых жизнях не раз. Я уже тебя где-то встречал, походу в прошлых жизнях, прошлых жизнях.
That was a group called Noikograd, young Russian electronic music duo. Before that, we heard Pharoah from the new album called Frequency. And to start off, we heard Yaroski from Shaman. Here's a track my friend Alex Christoforou, who was a guest on my show about a month and a half ago, 2 months ago. He's a young Ukrainian from Odessa. And when he was on the show, I asked him to put together a list of music that he liked. And this track is from a group called Molchat Doma. It's called Tochka.
твоя рука. Дальше буду только метели, 3 недели ждать.
дождалась твоего звонка. Прогулка не коротка. Переулками до катка. Все случилось, как мы хотели. Налетели кудрявые облака. Давай найдем себе место, ведь в мире все интересно, да. Это печально и честно, и эта ночь — это чистота. Над городом кружит снег. Он скоро укроет всех. Даже те, кто не верит в приметы, уничтожат его кометы. От грохота дискотек. Устал 21 век. Ведь сегодня они бесполезны. Слышишь, где-то играет оркестр. Давай найдем себе место, ведь в мире все интересно, да. Это печально и честно, и эта ночь — это чистота.
Before we took that break, we heard the last track. Forgive me, my Cyrillic is still not what it should be, nowhere close. But I had to look up the translation. I don't know the title of the song, but the group is called Like a Badass. It's a good title, good band name. And before that, we heard Molcha Doma. And now we're going to hear something from a duo from Belarus called Nemiga. I've featured them quite a bit on the show in the past. This is a brand new track. It's just come out. I love this group. They're very prolific and I don't know, they just have a great sound. That's all I'll say.
Пришло мне твои фото с вопросами. Зачем говорить с тобой твоими фразами? Я вижу кристалл в глазах, но не дышу кристаллами. Я люблю уют и дом, мы такие разные. И я не твоя. Ты не
Ты не сможешь остановиться. Тебе нужно мое лицо. Твоя мечта увидеть, как я утром буду бриться. Но мне все равно. Я не хочу быть с тобой. Я не из тех, кто за заботу. Я из тех, кто всегда без работы. Мои друзья все роботы, они все жили без забот. Они все ждут свой лот слоты. Мы горели до субботы.
я не твоя. Сижу одна, смотрю в окно и слышу чей-то голос где-то. Таких, как я, навалом тут в мотивах городского гетто. Все дышат мыслью не пропасть и стать хоть кем-то в этом мире. Ведь если смерть откроет пасть, тебе не спрятаться в квартире. Но пока ты тут, убери смуть и не бойся остаться один. Оставаться наедине было бы сложным, если бы не. Было бы сложным, если бы я совсем не любила себя. Совсем не любила себя. Все эти разговоры по ночам на самом деле вовсе не звучат. На самом деле они не снаружи. Я спорил сам с собой, что никому не нужен. Все эти разговоры по ночам напоминают чем-то получая, который шепчет из-под балаклав, что я ненавижу себя. сойти с ума в этой комнате, как бы не сойти с ума в полной темноте. Путается в волосах больной голос мой, больной голос мой, больной голос мой. Как бы не сойти с ума в этой комнате, как бы не сойти с ума в полной темноте. Путается в волосах сорванный голос мой, сорванный голос мой, сорванный голос мой. Я не чувствую боли там внутри. Убитый ребенок, посмотри, изрезано сердце на куски словами из детской памяти. Когда все смеются над тобой, когда все похожи, а ты другой, так сложно остаться и сохранить огонь, что внутри горит. Как бы не сойти с ума в этой комнате, как бы не сойти с ума в полной темноте. Путается в волосах больной голос мой, больной голос мой, больной голос мой. Как бы не сойти с ума в этой комнате, как бы не сойти с ума в полной темноте. Путается в волосах сорванный голос мой, сорванный голос мой. Этот голос мой.
Ко мне дотронуться, с виду камень на колосом веет душу по комнате. Из угла в угол горести, ты прости мои помыслы. Сердце резаны розами, убегаю от голосов, снова спрятав под волосами глаза. Бреду понять, пытаюсь, ты тут не прав. Над собой мне снова страшно, вдруг снова не так. Обидно до слез на меня, менять уже поздно. Я под ногтем заноза, достань меня, выкинь снова в мусорный бак. Болью болен то ли я, то ли проклятый рай. Внутри держивое пламя, до сердца дотла. Молил и снова любил, да езжу пословный. Кричит голос мой сорванный, объясни мне, как Господи жизнь сам.
Не сойти с ума, как бы не сойти с ума. Кутается в волосах больной голос мой, больной голос мой. Как бы не сойти с ума в этой комнате, как бы не сойти с ума в полной темноте. Кутается в волосах сорванный голос мой, сорванный голос мой. Этот голос мой. Как бы не сойти с ума в этой комнате, как бы не сойти с ума в полной темноте. Кутается в волосах сорванный голос мой, сорванный голос мой, сорванный голос мой.
Когда надоест нам с тобой ради мечты пробивать сквозь лед, но он даже не треснет. Что ж, ради любви танцевать на осколках мы больше не стерпим боль. Волнами мы разбиваемся в кровь, начинаем все заново, начинаем все заново. Мы заляпаны теми пятнами, теми травмами. Мы пропитаны этим запахом, этой жаждой жизни. В нас нет больше страха, мы делаем ставки, хоть победы ничто не значит. И когда мы накроем собой эти города, когда солнце взойдет, разбиваем мрак, начнется все заново. Нужна только искра и свет. Мы долго зависели от этой мысли, мы верили искренне в бред. Быть самым первым из тысяч, может я этого слишком хотел. Мы двигали нить, теперь разрывая их в клочья и заново начиная все заново. Мы заляпаны теми пятнами, теми травмами. Мы пропитаны этим запахом, этой жаждой жизни. Все быстрее и быстрее крутится мир, с ним закрутимся мы. И когда мы накроем собой эти города, когда солнце взойдет, разбиваем мрак, начнется все заново. И
поддавшись страху, исход один. Мы умираем чаще, чем хотим. Спит кит, молчит на дне растаявших сугробов, а мы в полусне. Вдох, выдох через глаза. Мы учимся дышать слезами по весне. Стоп, видишь, вот и он. За забором из подснежников стоит наш дом. Свет, дым, мы внутри греемся под солнышком у реки. А поддавшись страху, исход один. Мы умираем чаще, чем хотим.
Here's a track by yet another Russian. What's with these Russian people? They actually have music? What's going on over there? I thought that they didn't have that. I thought they weren't even human beings. Here's a track by Palina called Months. Beautiful artist, great performance, lovely song.
Месяц будет долгий, в округе только злые волки, а ты для них заблудшая барашка, напуганно бежишь. Белая рубашка, и будто бы салют, но как же тяжко, сверкает небо нервная затяжка, ему не возразишь. И хочется скулить, и нечего искать, и снится снегопад. Сердце нараспашку затянет руки кабельные стяжка. Никто не мог подумать, что так страшно бывает наяву. Идет и качается, и плачет, терпение качается, а значит, сейчас я сорву. Не на что сослаться, мне хочется любить и не бояться, мне хочется забыть об этом сходу, заклеить изнутри. Но сердце не простит такой измены, пылали города, стучали вены. Мне кажется, достаточно на это потрачено любые. Такая пустота, трава идет в депо. Печальная страна, но в ней мое окно. Но в ней мое окно. Но в ней мое.
Твои глаза сверкают не для меня, не для меня. Оставить все, но это не для меня, не для меня. Если ты унесешься вверх, И мое сердце вывери, солнце выгорит, мысли выбыли, где бы мы были, и любовь, и любовь. Ты мое сердце выбери, солнце выгорит, мысли выбыли, где бы мы были, и любовь, где же ты, моя любовь?
Твои уста все шепчут не для меня, не для меня. Рукой о стол, ведь это не для меня, не для меня.
Если ты унесешься ветром, ветром, сохрани с тобою мой огонь, заглушит мою боль. И мое сердце выбери, солнце выгорит, мысли выбыли, где бы мы были, и любовь, и любовь. Ты мое сердце выбери, солнце выгорит, мысли выбыли, где бы мы были, и любовь, где же ты, моя любовь?
схватке. Чего ради? Я чувствовал, как все мое лечится, если она со мной, рядом. Ей нравился мой шепот, заплетенные ей волосы, когда я был за ее спиной. Мой шепот гулял в ее локонах нежным голосом с содержанием слов не для радио. Помню ту стадию, когда хотел называть женой. Я не заметил, как стало тесно, а потом все закончилось землей выжженной. Но знаешь, даже тогда пейзаж получился чудесный. Помню волны дрожи на поверхности ее кожи и даже под кожей. Жизнь может быть очень простой и в то же время той, что делает мысли глубже, стройнее, строже. Ее дыхание клубами плотными рвалось наружу, билось о потолок. Я сейчас вспоминаю, и мне кажется, мы были зверями, животными, и если это порог, то цельтесь камнями в сплетение передних и задних лап, а не рук и ног. Лучшее время, если есть оно, стоит на месте. Я к тому, что время тогда не шло. Можно было лежать, вдыхать холод через окно. Я видел в глазах ее белое, черное и тонкое красное волокно. Зимние пейзажи. Город мажет снегом, время года холод. Время года не меняет суть. Утолили голод молодые люди. Молодые любят счастье и веселье, ласки после драки, ссадины на теле, признак сладкой кожи. Помнишь, как я ожил с тяжкого похмелья от прикосновений схожих станций в полумраке? В однокомнатной квартире в шаге от тяжелых облаков над белым миром. Проживали жизнь вкратце, планом было спать, пока нам хватит сил не просыпаться. Стал бы я счастливее, если бы могли остаться. Талые глаза на влажном месте. Не исключение мои
sadly, it's time to go, and as always, it always seems like time flies when we're having fun. Special shout out to Liz Hill. Thank you so much for your ongoing support and for helping organize things. And always appreciate that. We'll see you next week if the good Lord's willing and the creek don't rise. Stay tuned for Freedom Highway with your host Nick Pankin coming up right after this.